Born February 20th, 1967, in Aberdeen, Washington, Kurt Cobain enjoyed a relatively happy childhood until his parents divorced when he was 9, which marked a significant turning point in his emotional well-being. Subsequently, he grappled with frequent turmoil and anger, experiences that would later permeate his music as both a subject and driving force. Throughout his teenage years, Cobain found himself shifting between relatives' homes, staying with friends' families, and at times even resorting to sleeping in hospital waiting rooms, and, legend has it, underneath a bridge. During this period, he engaged in drug use and participated in acts of petty vandalism as acts of teenage rebellion. From a young age, Cobain displayed a strong musical aptitude, and by the mid-1980s, he began collaborating with members of the local sludge rock band, the Melvins, who would later achieve national recognition in the 1990s. In 1985, he crafted a homemade tape featuring original songs with Melvins drummer Dale Crover, the infamous Fecal Matter demo, which caught the attention of local bassist Krist Novoselic. Together, Cobain and Novoselic formed a band in 1987. The band's first drummer, Bob McFadden, left after just 6 weeks of playing with the band, which had formed into a Creedence Clearwater Revival tribute band. Soon after, Cobain and Novoselic found Eric Burkhart, who fit better than McFadden. Burkhart's drumming shaped Nirvana's early sound. They practiced Cobain's tape initially, but soon began writing new material. Burkhart stayed until October 1987, when he left for a Burger King manager position, marking the start of Nirvana's drummer search again. Dale Crover briefly filled in, and it was Dale who recommended Dave Foster. Dave only played a few live performances and was then fired by Kurt, due to Dave being arrested for assault. Kurt and Chris then finally found a more permanent drummer in 1988, Chad Channing. Chad had been playing in bands for a few years and had formed a band with future Nirvana guitarist Jason Everman called Stone Crow in 1985. Everman and Channing had been friends since 5th grade and had played in high school bands together. Channing also started Tick Dolly Row with Chris Carr, John Hurd, and Ben Shepherd, who later joined Soundgarden as a bassist. Tick Dolly Row shared a bill with Nirvana, then known as Bliss. Soon after, a mutual friend introduced Channing to Kurt Cobain and Krist Novoselic, who were in need of a drummer. As mentioned before, during their initial months, the band went through a series of names, including Skid Row, Pin Cap Chew, Bliss, and Ted Ed Fred. The band played under the name Nirvana for the first time on March 19, 1988, at Community World Theater, Tacoma, Washington, together with the bands Lush and Vampire Lesbos. One of the group's demo tapes found its way to Jonathan Pullman of the Seattle independent record label Sub Pop, which signed the band to produce its first single, Love Buzz, in 1988, and its first album, Bleach, in 1989. Following the release of their debut single Love Buzz on Sub Pop in November 1988, Nirvana rehearsed for 2 to 3 weeks, gearing up to record a full-length album. Despite Sub Pop initially requesting an EP, led by producer Jack Endino, the main recording sessions for Bleach unfolded at Reciprocal Recording Studios in Seattle. Nirvana embarked on their recording journey with a 5-hour session on December 24, 1988, followed by additional sessions on December 29th through the 31st, and January 14th and 24th of the following year. Notably, 3 tracks, Floyd the Barber, Paper Cuts, and Downer, had been previously recorded with Melvins drummer Dale Crover in January 1988. Despite efforts to re-record these tracks with new drummer Chad Channing, the band opted to remix the versions featuring Crover for inclusion on the final version of Bleach. Big Long Now was omitted from the album at Kurt Cobain's request, as he felt it would contribute to an excess of slow, heavy tracks on the record. Endino invoiced the band for 30 hours of recording time, totaling $606.17. Guitarist Jason Everman, impressed by Nirvana's demo featuring Dale Crover, provided the financial backing for the sessions, and briefly joined the band as a second guitarist. Despite not performing on the album, Everman was credited as a guitarist on the album sleeve and appeared on the album cover, a gesture aimed at making him feel part of the band's dynamic. The album cover of Nirvana's debut studio album, photographed by Kurt Cobain's then-girlfriend Tracy Marander, was captured during a concert at the Rico Muse Art Gallery in Olympia, Washington. The cover conformed to Sub Pop's design aesthetic, a dark field of color with bold type and a striking photo. The photo was reversed out as if it were a film negative. Nirvana commenced their West Coast tour, including a performance at the University of Washington on February 25, 1989. Their first European tour, co-headlining with Tad, kicked off at Newcastle Riverside venue on October 23, 1989. The album was initially titled Too Many Humans, but was renamed Bleach after Cobain encountered an AIDS prevention poster in San Francisco, advocating for bleaching of needles. Dissatisfaction with guitarist Jason Everman during the Bleach tour led to his departure, though the details remain disputed. Despite Sub Pop's limited promotion, Bleach steadily sold, albeit with Cobain expressing frustration over the label's handling of the album. According to Cobain, the music on Bleach adhered to the grunge genre heavily endorsed by Sub Pop. He felt pressure from both Sub Pop and the grunge scene to conform to a rock music style, liking his approach to stripping it down and emulating Aerosmith. Cobain acknowledged that he suppressed his arty and pop songwriting traits to meet the expectations of the grunge sound and build a fan base. Krist Novoselic revealed in a 2001 interview with Rolling Stone that the band drew influence from albums by the Smithereens and Celtic Frost, which they listened to in their tour van. The songs on Bleach were described as deliberately bleak, catastrophic, and lyrically sparse, lacking the manic derangement or sense of release found in their live performances. Cobain aimed to present a more polished and urban side of himself through the album's one-dimensional song structures. Bleach was heavily influenced by the Seattle-based sludge metal scene of the late 1980s and early 1990s, particularly by the Melvins. The album's abundance of dirty sludge elements, with Sub Pop describing the single Love Buzz / Big Cheese as heavy pop sludge. Cobain's approach to songwriting was characterized by a disregard for traditional lyric structure, with many lyrics written hastily the night before recording sessions. Despite Cobain's claim that he didn't care much about the lyrics on Bleach, it's been noted that many songs reflect Cobain's personal experiences and views, such as Mr. Mustache, inspired by his disdain for macho behavior, and School, a critique of the Seattle music scene and Sub Pop in particular. Bleach stands as Nirvana's sole album under the Sub Pop label. Though it initially did not chart, it garnered favorable reviews from critics. However, upon international reissue by Geffen Records in 1992, following the success of Nirvana's second album, Nevermind, Bleach climbed to number 89 on the Billboard 200, number 33 on the UK album chart, and number 34 on the Australian album chart. Bleach had already sold 40,000 copies in North America before the release of Nevermind, and has since achieved platinum status, selling over 1.9 million copies in the United States alone. Notably, it remains Sub Pop's top-selling album and attained renowned popularity following Kurt Cobain's death in April 1994, reaching number 1 on the Top Pop category albums chart. In April 2019, Rolling Stone ranked Bleach at number 13 on its list of the greatest grunge albums. In April 1990, Nirvana commenced recording 8 tracks at Smart Studios, under the guidance of producer Butch Vig, for their second album. However, the sessions were abruptly halted due to Cobain losing his voice. During this time, Cobain and Novoselic grew disillusioned with Channing's drumming style, while Channing himself voiced frustration over his lack of involvement in the songwriting process. These creative differences ultimately led to Channing's departure following the band's April to May 1990 tour, a decision reached together within the group. As the quest for a new drummer commenced, Cobain interjected creativity into one of the band's fan club letters distributed that summer. The letter humorously announces Chad's departure from Nirvana and playfully hints at potential replacements, including using drum machines. The letter reads, "Chad isn't in the band anymore. We'll miss him. We will have a single out real soon. We recorded with Butch Vig in Madison. What a swell guy. We don't know what may lie ahead. Maybe we'll sign with Disney. Maybe we'll get a drum machine. Maybe we'll get Phil Collins on drums. As for now, the Pilot Bureau of Chris and Kurt bid you farewell." The drummer who helped out between Chad's departure and Dave's arrival was Mudhoney's Dan Peters, who filled in on occasion and can be heard on the Sliver single released on Sub Pop. Utilizing the recordings from Smart Studios as a demo, Nirvana sought a new contract with a major label. In the fall of 1990, the band re-entered the studio to re-record the tracks for their forthcoming studio album. This time they enlisted Dave Grohl as their new drummer, who seamlessly integrated many of Channing's drum parts into the revamped recordings. The band was about to explode, and no one knew it, or was ready for it. I just wanted to take a minute to talk about my own experience with Nirvana's Bleach. So Bleach was actually one of the last Nirvana albums that I actually got. I got the Unplugged album, was the first one that I bought. Somebody had gave me Incesticide, so I had that one, but I didn't really listen to it that much. It wasn't until the Unplugged album that I really got into Nirvana. At that time, everything was pretty much over as far as the band. It was 1994, and the only reason I knew there was another album was because in the Unplugged performance, the first song is about a girl, and Kurt says, "This is from our first album. Most people don't own it." So I knew, hey, there's another Nirvana album I have to find. And at that time, it was either 1994 or 95, and Bleach was a rare album to find. You couldn't find it in any of the stores. The Unplugged album had just come out, so if you went to any of the main stores that sold music, it was packed with Unplugged. You could probably find Nevermind and In Utero, but that was it. Those were the 3 albums that were available. So I finally found it at a used CD store. It was on the other side of town. It was called CD Warehouse. And it was an amazing experience going in there for the first time, because there was racks of CDs just going on and on. And I was like a kid in a candy store, just all these bands and albums that I'd never heard of. And so I went straight to the in section and looked for Nirvana. And of course they had
In Utero, Nevermind. They had a couple of the Nirvana singles. Actually, they had Smells Like Teen Spirit, All Apologies. They might have had another one, and I eventually got those too. But they didn't have Bleach, so I was leaving the store, and that's when I saw behind the counter was, a wall of CDs, and there was Nirvana's Bleach, and it was over $20. Back then, that was a lot for a CD, and I didn't have that much money. But my parents knew that I was searching for this CD, so they gave me an advance on my allowance, and I got the album. My first time listening to it, I honestly wasn't that taken with it. I knew about a girl already, so I kind of skipped over that one. The songs that stood out on first listening was School and Love Buzz. I eventually started to listen to Blue, but I quickly became uninterested in the album. Going from Unplugged and Nevermind to Bleach was a big difference, a big shift. And I was 8 or 9 at the time. So of course, School was a funny song to me. And so I liked that one. But interestingly enough, it was like maybe a few months later, I ended up trading Nirvana's Bleach for none other than The Simpsons Sing the Blues. Yeah, I did that. 9-year-old me did that. Back then, comedy albums were not that abundant, so there was Weird Al, but hearing The Simpsons sing was entertaining to me, and I wanted to listen to Do the Bartman like over and over again. So my friend had it, and I was like, hey, I'll trade you for it. And he jokingly said, oh yeah, I'll trade you for your Nirvana Bleach. And I was like, sure. And we just traded. And I don't know how long after, maybe like a week or so, my parents found out somehow. And I got in trouble because they knew that I had given away something that was way more valuable than The Simpsons Sing the Blues. So they said, you got to get it back. And knowing how kids work, I was like, no way, I can't do that. I traded. It's a done deal. I can't go back. But they did a sneak around deal, and they talked to the kids' parents. And the next day, we showed up at school and had to give the CDs back. So I got my Nirvana Bleach back. I didn't actually start to appreciate the album until I got my first car when I was 16, and I got a CD player installed. Back then, cars came with cassette players in them, and so I got a CD player installed, and I had actually took most of my CD collection and traded it in to that very used CD store to get extra money to get a car. I'd gotten a job, traded in like all my music to get a car, but I did not trade any of my Nirvana CDs. Those were one of the few that I kept. So I started driving around and I started listening to Nirvana again, and I'd gotten bored with all the other albums, and I hadn't listened to Bleach that much. So I put it in and started driving around town listening to it, and it became my favorite Nirvana album. Is it my favorite Nirvana album now? I don't know. I don't think it's as good as Nevermind, but it's up there. It's a really unique album that's different than anything else. So that's my experience with Nirvana Bleach. So tell me down in the comments, what's your experience getting the Bleach album, hearing it for the first time, and what did you think of it on the first listen? So up next is the Nirvana history, Nevermind era. So stay tuned. I'm working on that one now. Thanks.